Welcome to the third submodule in the Food Policy Regulatory Framework and Strategic Risk Management subunit. And this is on risk and crisis management. So this submodule provides a structured framework for understanding and implementing risk and crisis management systems within organizations operating in complex regulatory and operational environments. It distinguishes between risk, the probability and impact of potential events, and crisis, which is the high impact disruptive events requiring immediate response. And it also introduces systematic process for risk identification, assessment, treatment, and monitoring. So the learning outcome is you will be able to develop risk management plans, crisis protocols, and recovery strategies to effectively address operational disruptions. By the end of this module, you will be able to distinguish between risk and crisis, identify different types of organizational risks, apply risk assessment tools like the risk matrix, the FMEA, the root cause, and also root cause analysis. You'll also be able to develop structured risk management plans and design crisis response and recovery strategies. So let's start with the fundamentals. What exactly is a risk? A risk is a probability of an event occurring multiplied by its impact. So it's a calculation. How likely is something to happen and how bad would it be if it did? A crisis, on the other hand, is a high impact, low frequency event that threatens organizational stability. Crises are the kinds of disruptions that can't be managed through routine procedures. They require extraordinary responses. So let's clarify a few more important terms that are easy to confuse. So first is risk versus uncertainty. So risk refers to situations where probabilities can be estimated, while uncertainty involves unknown or unpredictable outcomes. So you genuinely do not know the odds of something happening. So the other one is hazard versus vulnerability. A hazard is a potential source of harm. Vulnerability refers to the degree to which your organization is susceptible to that harm. So you can have a hazard without it causing damage if your vulnerability is low. So the other important distinction is crisis versus incident. Crisis is an incident is a disruptive event that can usually be managed through routine procedures, whereas a crisis threatens organizational survival and requires extraordinary measures. So think major food contamination events, cyber attacks, and other things that can halt operations or that can impact sudden supply chain collapse. And finally, operational disruption. It's any interruption that affects normal businesses or processes, such as supply delays, system failures, or workforce shortages. So now we're looking at the main types of risks. Strategic risks arise from long-term decisions and external environmental challenges like market shifts, new regulations, reputational damage, or disruptive competitors, while operational risks stem from failures in day-to-day processes like supply chain disruptions, equipment breakdowns, and staff shortages. Financial risks can affect an organization's economic stability and may involve cash flow problems, credit defaults, inflation, or exchange rate fluctuations. So, how we identify is the first one is the strategic risk comes from long-term decisions and external environment changes. The operational risk comes from failures in day-to-day processes, and the financial risks have the chance of affecting cash flow and many other financial procedures of an organization. The other two types of risks that we want to identify is the compliance and legal risk. and also the reputational risk. So the compliance and legal risk includes breaches of health regulations, labor laws, or data protection, and non-compliance in this area can be particularly damaging to an organization. And the reputational risk can be the most dangerous of all. It's damage that can be rapid and difficult to reverse. So we are understanding now that risk management isn't like a one-time exercise, it's a continuous cycle. So the cycle has 5 stages. Risk identification, where we understand what could go wrong. There's risk assessment, where we kind of try to understand how likely and how severe it is. And there's risk evaluation, where we search to understand how does this compare, or we ask ourselves, how does this compare to our risk tolerance. The risk treatment, where we try to understand what we're going to do about it, and the monitoring and review is to see if our response is working or not. So this cycle needs to be adapted, embedded in operational culture. It needs to be revisited regularly and not just triggered by incidents. So there are 2 international standards that provide excellent structured guidances. These are just 2 of the few. So the ISO 31000 outlines, or 31,000 outlines principles for effective risk management, emphasizing integration into processes, inclusiveness, and adaptability. So if your organization is looking to formalize its risk management approach, this is the benchmark. The other one is the ISO 22301, which focuses on business continuity management systems, ensuring that organizations can maintain critical functions during disruptions. So these 2 standards offer a robust framework for both preventing disruptions and surviving them. So let's look at 4 key risk assessment tools. So these are most of the tools that we use when a risk arises. The first one is a risk matrix. The second one is a failure mode and effects analysis, which is the FMEA. The root cause analysis, or commonly called the RCA, and the SWOT analysis. So the risk matrix is probably the most widely used risk tool. It plots risks on a 2-axis grid, probability on one axis, impact on the other. And this allows us to visualize which risks are high priority, which are high likelihood, high impact, and which can be monitored with lower urgency. This matrix helps prioritize your response. You generally can't manage every risk equally, so you need to put a hierarchy, or you need to put it in a hierarchy so you can handle it step by step moving forward. And this matrix points out where to focus for first. The other one is a root cause analysis. This is mostly about going deeper than the surface problem, as it is fish. When something goes wrong, food waste spikes, a delivery for example, like there's a food waste spike, there's a delivery fail, a hygiene breach. Root cause analysis helps us understand why. It helps us ask the question why, and we need to keep asking why until we reach the underlying cause. So common techniques in this root cause analysis include the 5 whys method and the fishbone diagram. What we're looking at right now is the fishbone diagram, and the goal of this whole analysis assessment is to reach kind of the underlying cause and understand the root problem, and not just to fix it. The next one is the SWOT analysis, SWOT, which stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This analysis is all about like understanding internal vulnerabilities, alongside external pressures. So in the context of food policy and regulation, a SWOT analysis um, might highlight compliance strengths, gap in staff training as a weakness, emerging sustainable practices as opportunities, and upcoming regulatory changes as threats. Let us do a quick knowledge check. So, which is an operational risk? Inflation, equipment breakdown, new competitor, exchange rate fluctuation. So, which of these is an operational risk? Can it be inflation? Could it be equipment breakdown? Could it be a new competitor or an exchange rate fluctuation? So the answer is B. An equipment breakdown is an operational risk and it poses a risk to our day to day operations. Now, moving on to crisis management. Crises are typically sudden, high pressure situations with significant uncertainty, intense scrutiny, and potential reputational consequences. So, crisis has a life cycle. So, the pre-crisis, this is where you invest in prevention, preparedness, and planning. The crisis response is the immediate action to control damage. The recovery is restoring operations and rebuilding trust. And the post-crisis learning is evaluating performance and improving systems. So moving on. There is also a business impact analysis, which is a critical tool in crisis preparedness. It helps you identify what your critical process, the acceptable downtime, and the potential losses. And two key metrics you'll encounter in the business impact analysis is the RTO and the RPO, which is the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective. Recovery point objective is the maximum acceptable data or process loss manufactured in a time, and the recovery time objective, which is how quickly you need to restore a function after disruption. So knowing these would help prioritize recovery efforts when a crisis hits. So on today's environment, we are all vulnerable to digital risk. So the key threats under digital risk are classified under ransomware, phishing, data breaches, or system downtime. And these aren't very sort of complex IT problems. They can happen almost very suddenly, and the way to combat this is to develop digital resilience, and which is now like a core operational requirement for most organizations. So the final concept worth highlighting is the key risk indicators, or the KRIs. These are metrics signaling risk before a problem becomes a crisis. So three important examples in food operations are under key risk indicators are supplier delay frequency, which means if our supplier gets delivery gets delayed frequently, it means that there is a supposed future risk waiting to happen. And there's also the staff turnover rate. If we have a high staff turnover rate, it means that we are slowly going towards risk, and it's also a great indicator of the trajectory. And there's also the system downtime frequency. This is also another key risk indicator. So let's do a knowledge check. A company experiences a ransomware attack that halts operations. So identify the immediate crisis management actions and one recovery strategy. So let's go through this. When a company experiences a ransomware attack, what are the immediate crisis management actions and then the possible recovery strategy? So the suggested answers are activate crisis response team. We need to isolate affected systems. We need to notify stakeholders and also furthermore implement data recovery plan and review cybersecurity protocols. So all of this go back into everything that we've discussed earlier. When we activate crisis response team, we are able to get onto the problem fast, and when we isolate affected systems using one of the one of the methods of resolving risk, we are able to also notify stakeholders and implement data recovery plan. And also we need to always review and recheck cybersecurity protocols. So, and that brings us to the end of module 2. We've covered many subjects and topics around regulatory landscape governing, and these all areas are interconnected. So take the time to review the slides and go through the knowledge checks and do the exercises regularly. Thank you.